The Empire's summons echoed through every corridor of her mind, cold and absolute. Return, serve, and command the fleets that would enslave Earth. She had been taken as a child, molded into a strategist for alien overlords, her mind sharpened by endless drills and war games until even her teachers whispered of her genius. They praised her brilliance, but she was never praised as human, only as a weapon that belonged to them. Every victory in the simulators had been a chain around her neck, every accolade another reminder that she was crafted for conquest, not choice. Now the order came, cloaked as duty, but carrying the weight of threat. If she refused, her homeworld would pay the price. The faces of people she barely remembered flickered in her memory, shadows of a childhood stolen. She had not known freedom, only command halls, star maps, and alien eyes watching her every move. Yet the thought of returning to Earth as its conqueror was unbearable. She could not be the knife at humanity's throat. Her brilliance had been sharpened for the Empire, but her heart still belonged to her people. For the first time, she realized the danger of her own existence. As long as she remained their strategist, Earth's survival was doomed. Escape was unthinkable. The Empire's reach spanned entire star clusters, their assassins silent and efficient, their surveillance absolute. But survival demanded risk. She had studied their networks, memorized their patterns, absorbed their arrogance. She knew where the cracks lay, where the Empire's faith in its own superiority blinded it. Her decision was not heroic, it was desperate. She would not die as their tool. She would not kill for their glory. Her choice ignited a fire in her chest, a flame that fear could not extinguish. Every lesson they forced into her mind became a weapon to turn against them. She mapped her escape in silence, feigning obedience while storing stolen fragments of data and rehearsing every step in her thoughts. The Empire believed loyalty was inevitable. They had never considered that a human might choose defiance over survival within the system. That was their mistake, and she would exploit it. The Order demanded her return, but return meant chains, and chains meant death of the spirit. She chose instead to vanish, to dissolve into the shadows of space and risk being hunted until the stars themselves grew cold. Better to be prey fighting to live than a predator forced to devour her own. As she slipped into exile, the echo of the Empire's command still rang in her ears, but her resolve was unshakable. She would not bend. She would not return. She chose survival, and in that choice lay the spark of humanity's defiance. The Empire reacted with precision the instant her absence was discovered. To them, she was not a woman but property, and property must never slip beyond control. Across the void their hunters moved, silent assassins, genetically enhanced trackers, and machines built to predict every possible deviation. They believed she could not run far. They believed she would be cornered as easily as prey in a cage. What they did not believe, what they could not comprehend, was that a human who had studied their arrogance knew exactly how to slip between their assumptions. Her first flight was not marked by speed, but by misdirection. She sabotaged transport systems so her pursuers would follow false trails, rerouted signals to suggest she had boarded ships she had never touched, and cloaked her movements among forgotten colonies the Empire considered beneath notice. Each decision carried the weight of survival. She could not match them in strength or numbers, but she could outthink them. Every Empire soldier had been trained to expect obedience and predict rebellion. They had not been trained to fight creativity born of desperation. Days bled into weeks, and the chase ground her down. She had no fleet, no allies, no safe harbor. Hunger gnawed at her, exhaustion pressed against her bones, and fear whispered that sooner or later their patience would outlast her endurance. She slept in fragments, ears straining for the sound of pursuit. Yet in her weakness, she found a paradoxical strength. The Empire assumed victory would come through relentless force. She learned survival came through adaptation. Every time she faltered, she forced herself to think again, to twist the problem, to turn weakness into a weapon. One assassin came closer than any before, cornering her in a derelict mining station. She could not match its strength, could not hope to survive in combat, but she remembered its training manuals, the arrogance of its command protocols. With nothing but a stolen tool and knowledge buried deep in memory, she triggered a cascade of malfunctions that blinded the assassin's sensors. Its strength turned useless in the void, its precision undone by a flaw too insignificant for the Empire ever to have considered. It fell into silence, defeated not by force, but by the very ingenuity they had once praised in her. The pursuit did not stop. For each hunter lost, the Empire released more, determined to drag her back or erase her from existence. Yet every encounter hardened her resolve. She was no longer the student who had learned tactics to impress her instructors. She was the strategist who had tasted freedom and realized survival itself was victory. The Empire saw her as prey, but step by step, mistake by mistake, they became the ones being outmaneuvered. At last she understood the truth. Running would never be enough. She could vanish into shadows 1,000 times, but shadows could not shelter her forever. The Empire would not rest until Earth was chained and she was returned to the place they believed she belonged. The longer she remained alone, the greater the danger grew for the people she had sworn not to betray. Survival demanded more than escape. It demanded defiance. It demanded she stop being prey and become something far more dangerous, a human who refused to accept the inevitability of their power. She reached Earth not as a conqueror but as a fugitive, carrying within her mind both the burden of knowledge and the risk of exposure. Humanity had not been crushed, though it lived under the shadow of impending conquest. Scattered colonies and fractured governments waited for the inevitable, some whispering of resistance, while others bowed their heads in fear. Her arrival was met not with cheers but suspicion. To many she looked like the Empire's tool, a weapon crafted to destroy them from within. Their distrust was earned, for she bore the mark of indoctrination, the scars of her upbringing, and the cold precision of someone shaped by alien hands. But suspicion did not silence her. She carried truths no other human possessed, weaknesses in the Empire's fleets, blind spots in their command, vulnerabilities in their psychology. She began in secret, speaking to those who still believed survival was possible. She taught them what she knew. Never fight where the Empire expects you. Never meet strength with strength. Never trust the illusion of inevitability. Her words were not grand speeches, but practical lessons, delivered in hushed tones across hidden rooms and encrypted channels. Those who listened saw patterns unfold. They learned how to strike without being seen, how to vanish before retaliation, how to turn scraps of stolen technology into tools of defiance. The first victories were small: an ambushed patrol, a supply line disrupted, a listening post destroyed before its warning could spread. Yet each success sent ripples through the frightened populace. Fear began to shift into something sharper. The Empire could bleed. Its reach was vast but not invincible. The strategist who had once been their servant was now the spark of rebellion. Humanity adapted quickly, not through brute force, but through creativity, improvisation, and the will to endure. Where the Empire relied on rigid doctrine, humans thrived in chaos. What the Empire dismissed as disorder was in truth their greatest strength. Still, her path was not without struggle. Many leaders mistrusted her, seeing only the shadow of the Empire in her training. They demanded proof, and she gave it not in words but in deeds. When a settlement was targeted for eradication, she orchestrated its survival by turning the Empire's own communication grid against itself. When assassins came once more, she lured them into traps that shattered their illusion of superiority. With each act, she demonstrated that loyalty to humanity was not claimed by speech, but earned by sacrifice. Slowly, suspicion gave way to reluctant respect, then to belief. The resistance grew in numbers and skill. Farmers became saboteurs, students became couriers, engineers became builders of weapons cobbled from fragments of alien machinery. What began as scattered sparks became a network of fire. The Empire, once unchallenged, found itself bleeding resources to contain uprisings too small and unpredictable to crush in a single blow. Their response was fury, and fury blinded them further. For every heavy-handed strike they launched, humanity slipped deeper into defiance. She watched it unfold with both pride and dread. Pride, because humanity was no longer waiting to be conquered, but choosing to fight. Dread, because the Empire's retaliation would escalate beyond skirmishes. She knew what would come, for she had studied their patterns too well. The Empire would send fleets, not to conquer, but to burn. They would make Earth an example, a warning to every species that survival was impossible against their will. The Resistance had won battles, but the war would soon arrive with crushing weight. And in that grim certainty, she found clarity. She had fled as prey, survived as a fugitive, and ignited rebellion as a teacher. Now she faced the reality she had always known was coming. To protect her people, she would need more than defiance. She would need to gamble everything on one final stratagem that could tilt the balance between annihilation and endurance. The time for hiding was over. The Empire was coming, and humanity's survival would depend on her last, most dangerous plan.